And with us is Wes Jolly. Wes, want to introduce yourself?
I'm Wes Jolly. I'm the world whiskey writer for ModernThirst.com. Been writing since around January timeframe.
Well, we've got a kind of a different take on the podcast today, and this will also be a video podcast like our other one, a video cast. So you'll find this on YouTube and on iTunes and all the fun podcast channels. But Wes and I, since the holidays have come around and we just had a release of what I think is probably one of the quintessential holiday whiskeys, we're going to do a tasting of multiple releases of Midwinter Night's Dram by High West Distillery, and that's out of Park City, Utah. This is a rye whiskey. It's a blend of a couple of different rye whiskeys. They're finished in French oak port barrels, and they've become very popular. I reviewed the original one on the site that I have here, the earlier one, which is Act 2.9 Scene 710 in my little whiskey bottle. I reviewed that on the site probably back in 2014, I think, when it was released. I scored it at a 90, and I absolutely loved it. I thought it was a really tasty little rye whiskey, and we thought it would be kind of neat to come back around and taste multiple different ones. I've got two, and Wes has three different ones to taste, including we both have some of the newer ones from Act 5. So we'll kind of go through those and see what we think and see how it's held up over the years. How do you think about that, Wes?
Sounds good. I have Act 2.4 from 2014 and Act 3.3 from 2015. and Act 5.3 from the most recent release in 2017. I thought it's an interesting blend. Basically, it appears that it's High West Rendezvous Rye of their MGP, their younger MGP, and an older Barton blend is what most will say that it's coming from with the French port cask, and I think it adds a unique profile to the Rendezvous, to the rye.
I think I've always been a big fan of High West. I don't want to say they do things wholly different than any other non-producer distiller who's been doing, but I really like that very similar to the way Smooth Ambler does it. They don't lie about it. There's no, they don't try to tell you that this was their secret grandfather's recipe. They kind of pretty much come right out and tell you exactly what they have in the bottle, and everything but tell you exactly where they bought it from, which specific distillery, but you can always find it out anyway. So I kind of like the way that they're very upfront with their consumers. And then on top of that, I just kind of always feel like they do a pretty damn good job of putting something in a bottle that tastes good. So I'm a fan, and this has been one of the more popular whiskeys I've had. One of my favorite ryes I've had, I guess, over the last 4 or 5 years. I will say I haven't tried Act 5 yet. The Act 5.5 is the one that I have. I haven't tried it. I've got it sitting here in a glass. Alongside the 2.9. I haven't tried the 2.9 yet in several months as well. So I'm kind of looking forward to this.
Great. I'm going to dive in with the 2 Point series, the 2014. Our whiskey club, the Proper Pour Whiskey Club, we've actually tasted the 2.4 and the 3.3, both known and blind. From November 2014 and September 2015, we tasted the 2.4 release, and I actually even found my notes from that. So that was interesting to go back and see from 3 years ago what I had to say about it.
Yeah, I just pulled up my review that I did of this one as well, and I know that there's a place where I can see when it was posted, but maybe on the mobile site it's harder to find. I don't know.
So you said you gave your version, the 2.9, you gave it a 90 on the site?
It was a 90, yeah.
I've rated this, when I first tasted 2.4, I gave it a 93. When I tasted it blind, I gave it a 92.5. And that was about a year apart when we tasted it known and tasted it blind. And for our group, the overall average is right at a 90 for this. I liked it a little bit better than some others in the group, but it is definitely was a winner for me. I was drinking it that Christmas of 2014.
Yeah, I think I've always explained this. The 2.9 to me has always, if people say, well, what does it taste like? I always say, well, there's, and I'm getting it again here. There is a ton of like a sweet citrus. It's almost like a syrupy lemon juice that comes out almost like lemon zest and simple syrup. And it's very characteristic of decently aged rye from MGP. You can taste it in some of the older single barrels of Smooth Ambler, but I get it in spades here, and it's along with some kind of gingerbread and cloves, and it smells like Christmas. I don't know how else to say it, but it makes it kind of the perfect time of year to break these out.
There were many times I had this sitting beside the fireplace in our house, and my first note when I first nosed it 3 years ago was liquid fruitcake. It reminded me of Christmas. I detect the finishing. I detect the French oak on it, and you definitely get that wine port finish on there with the spices. And for the taste, I have my notes are I get caramels, some burnt sugars, almost cola-esque. Burnt sugars with vanilla, dark fruits, and spice. And that finish just lingers. It does not come across as this 49.3%. Does not come across that in this version at all.
No, I still get a lot of the, especially on the finish. I think that port finishing comes through in spades. You really get that dark plum, sweet grape flavor on the dark fruit on the back of the palate as it finishes, and it's a long finish. It's really good. I agree. I get a lot of on the 2.9. I get a lot of vanilla and caramel. There's a lot of that rye spice on the back of it, but I get gingerbread, kind of shortbread, maybe shortbread more than gingerbread bread. And I get a little bit of the caramel up front, but it kind of gives way very quickly to the more baked goods kind of shortbread, I guess is probably the best way to say that.
I agree. The spices added in there. Nothing to me really overpowering. A nice good blend of the two different ryes, and just to me the right amount of time of in the French port barrels. This was really what got me excited about High West. Actually, was the this particular special release.
Yeah, this is tasty. I could go back to this. I wish I had more of it than that, but I could go back to this again and again. I love it. I'm a huge fan, by the way, of printing my own labels on anything that I'm saving. Trying to make it look like it's professional or special. So that's why I have my little round printing label with the Midwinter nice Dram logo on it.
Yeah, after looking back at what I scored it before, I would still put it in the same range. To me, that 2014 release is definitely a 92 range whiskey for me. I really like it.
Yeah, I think in retrospect, I would go higher. I know that there was a time, this was probably reviewed in 2015, if I had to guess, maybe 2014. But there was a time when I didn't like port finishes and any sort of barrel finish on a rye, and that might have caused it to fall a little bit at the time. But now, looking back on it, trying it now, I mean, this is I can't think of a lot of rye short of some, 10-year-old Smooth Ambler single barrels that I enjoy more than this. That's really good.
This is it's a great whiskey.
Do you want to move on to start us off on 3.3?
Sure. You don't have the 3 series, and actually the 3.3. I went out. I bought 2 bottles of it because I could find 1 bottle of the 2.4, and then when 3.3 came out, I immediately got 2, and I still have 1 unopened bottle sitting down there. And for me, I was actually a bit disappointed in the 2015 release versus, to me, there's the most difference between the 3. The 2014 and 17 to me are closer than the 14 and 15. Quite a different. I scored this twice in the group when I knew what it was. I scored it an 86. When I tasted it blind, I gave it an 83. So overall, it's about an 84 range whiskey for me, and for the club group, it actually has been tasted 8 or 9 times, and by different individuals and has come in at 83. So quite a difference, an 8-point spread in reality for me. And the biggest difference for me is on the nose for 2015. You get menthol, eucalyptus, mint, quite a bit more of that classic rye dill note. You get a lot of dill in this. One individual who tasted it actually described it as pickle juice, and actually black marker. Actually, a black marker like you can write on a board. So it's definitely a different nose.
Don't sniff it too deeply then.
Yeah, definitely a different nose than on 2014. On the taste, it's a little bit more astringent than the 2014. To me, not as pleasant on the finish. You get the same caramels. You get some dark fruits. You get almost some vermouth notes in this versus the 2014. Maybe a little bit of those baking spices again, but not as fruity as the 2014 or 2017. So right before we went on air, I tasted all three of them again just to get a feel for them. And when I go back to them, to me, of the three, I would still put the 2015 release, the Act 3 special release, at the lower end of the three. Was a little bit disappointed I could not find the Act 4 release in Colorado. They were sold out because of the popularity of the High West limited release. But yeah, I would probably put this down still in the 84, 85 range after revisiting with it.
Interesting. It's kind of disappointing. I'm glad I haven't found one for a while. We recorded episode 2 last week, and when we were done, I think we all stayed on and chatted for a little bit. And one of the things I lamented was the fact that I hadn't seen Midwinter's Night's Dram on shelves here in Louisville in quite some time. And the very next day, I just happened to be over. My parents are moving, and I was over at their house helping them get some stuff together. Stopped at a liquor store by their house, and sure enough, there's one sitting right on the shelf. And I mean, maybe I just need to talk about not being able to find William Leroy Weller and some other ones while we're on here, and pop into some stores tomorrow.
Yeah, that's a good idea. I remember seeing the picture of that when you got it. That kind of led me to saying, let's do a vertical.
Yeah, good call, by the way.
Let's taste several of them. But I mean, it is not a whiskey that I would turn down, but if I had the choice between the 14 and the 15, it'd be the 2014 Act 2 all the way.
Well, I've tasted very few ryes since we started the site in January of 2014. I've tasted very few ryes I like more.
That's a good thumbs up on that, I would say. I think definitely High West. I think that's why it's hard to find. The price is actually going up. I don't know what you had to pay for it in Louisville. In Colorado Springs, when I got the 2014, it was probably in the 74 to 79 range. The Act 5.3 was right at 90, a little over 90, 91 in Colorado Springs for the new release.
Yeah, I think it was $100. It might have been 105. I can't remember which one.
And that's what I've seen on a lot of people reporting on other sites talking about getting their hands on Act 5. The prevailing price seems to be right at 100, right at 3 figures. So
it makes sense. I know it's a young whiskey by law because of what's blended, but they do have some fairly old stuff blended into this, and you can tell it's not just lip service. They're not just pouring in 5% of a 15-year-old, 16-year-old rye. They've got a pretty substantial portion of this is an aged rye. So hopefully, I can understand it. And then of course the barrel finishing doubles your barrel costs and then some. So
this.
Given today's market, I think it's probably one of the ones that's worth paying retail for.
Right, I agree. I don't. I wouldn't say that it's not worth it. It's one that I would be willing to hunt out and pay 90 to 100 for it. I like the presentation, like the bottle, the old style glass, a little bit of sparkliness in the glass, and the labeling I think is a is a really nice take on giving it that older look also.
Mm-hmm. Let's move on to Act 5. I want to get into
Act
this.
5. So you have not tasted Act 5 yet, have you?
Not at all. Not even a sip.
Okay. So what do you get on the nose?
You know, I get a little bit more vanilla on the nose and a little bit less of that citrus punch. I kind of feel like I'm overusing this a little bit, but a little bit of kind of a circus peanut bubblegum kind of hint to it.
Oh, really?
I feel like I use that a lot anymore.
I definitely get the caramel and the vanilla note. And I have a very interesting description once the glass is empty. Last night I set the glass aside after it was empty, so I'm going to throw a fairly unique description on you when we get to the end after going back and smelling the glass. But I get cinnamon on the nose. If you've ever had those, a lot of times around Christmas, I'll have these mixed berry pies, Mrs. Smith pies or something. They'll have blackberries and raspberries and lots of different fruits in this mixed berry pie. I get that on the nose of this 2017 release, these dark fruits.
I can almost, I can smell the port, the dark fruit on the back of that.
And almost like a mulled spice or wine note.
Yeah, I was going to say kind of a cloves, but it's definitely like a spice wine.
Definitely a Christmas time dram, I would say, from one to sit and have by the fire. Definitely a wintertime drink.
Yeah, I'd say they've hit the naming and labeling on this one on the nose. I mean, they have matched what goes in the bottle matches how it's billed, and I love that. I think that's the best possible approach to it from a corporate standpoint. Not to derail it too much, but I did an event with a producer who has not been a distiller, and they're about to become a distiller. But we went out with a group of other. I guess we can talk about it. They allowed us to talk about it. It was Luxco. When we went to St. Louis, I had met with their marketing team in Cincinnati beforehand, and they were trying to pick out a name and a label for this new bourbon they wanted to release. And they wanted to go with a prohibition kind of theme. And the whole time we were going through this, they'd already decided. They just hadn't picked out the actual name. The whole time they were going through this, I kept talking with everyone, and I kept saying, very few people really correlate bourbon and prohibition, because there weren't, only 5 places making bourbon and prohibition. And when you think of prohibition, you think of gin and stuff that's distilled in somebody's basement, or Canadian whiskey that's running across the border. And then when we got to St. Louis and we started the tasting, it was a red wine finished source bourbon. I kept saying, how do these two go together? It just doesn't make any sense. If you're going to sell me on a prohibition label and make this a prohibition style whiskey, and then it's a wine finished bourbon that's 4 or 5 years old, I don't get it.
Yeah.
And they never brought it to market. Maybe because we all complained a little bit too much. I don't know. But anyway, this is the exact opposite. They've done a great job of matching the whole theme and all of the marketing and the images of it with what's actually in the bottle. And I think that's pretty cool.
So what do you get on the taste on, you have 5.5, I have 5.3. So pretty close to the batch release on both of these.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so there's a lot of notes there's a lot of similarities to 2.9 there. There's more pepper on this, more black pepper.
That is definitely one of my notes I put on the finish. I put cinnamon and pepper.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's spicy. It's a warm spice. Cinnamon, cloves. It reminds me of clove cigarettes. Have you ever been around people smoking those?
Yes, I get for my finish notes on that. I like the finish. I put cinnamon, pepper, toffee, like spiced toffee, clove. Is that something else I'd written down? Some almost dark chocolate.
Yeah, yeah. On the palate, I get a lot of caramel on the right on the tip of the tongue. I get a lot of sweet caramel, but there's a lot of oak in this that there's not in the first one. Like this tastes like an older bourbon to me, or older rye.
I agree. I get a little bit, I would say a touch more oak, especially than versus 2. I wrote on the taste some of the notes I jotted down were, again, some dark berry fruits, blackberry, cherry. I can detect, definitely, pick out the port. You can pick the finishing there. And I pick a little bit of ginger up in it, like a candied ginger almost. Maybe that's contributing to a little bit of that spice note that I get on the finish.
Yeah, there's something there that's kind of a sweet spice, but I can't really put my finger on it. It reminds me, this sounds really silly, but it reminds me of like a Thai chili sauce a little bit, that sweet but spicy. Maybe it is ginger. I don't know.
One of the things I would definitely say about this is I really think it's a balanced whiskey. I think the nose matches the taste. The finish is there's nothing really out of balance with each other. It's kind of what you smell is what you get.
I kind of love this whiskey. I got to be honest. This is really tasty.
It's a definitely, like I said, this is probably the 4th dram I've sat down with on this. And I would definitely say it's closer to the 2014, the Act 2 releases than the Act 3 release. I still would probably, I think, rate at this point the Act 2.4 that I have a little bit higher. But this is right on that 89, 90. It's like a 90 scored whiskey for me. Right there in the would buy another bottle of it if I found one.
Yeah, I was going to say I would rate this one somewhere around 90, 91. I would pick the 2.9 ahead of this, so that, again, saying that I probably underrated that originally on the site. I would say it's probably a 90-point whiskey. There is a little bit of a tannic finish to this one, a little barrel tannin as it dissipates that I don't like as much. When the 2.9 dissipates for me, it's the cinnamon and clove and that kind of sweet Christmas flavor, I guess you would say, is kind of what remains. And this one has that, but as it dissipates, I get a little bit of barrel tannins. And I would say that's really the big differentiator. I also say the nose on the 2.9 is incredible. It's just insane.
Right.
But I really like it. I really do. I hope I can find another bottle of it.
Agree. I think it's definitely a 90th whiskey, and the 2 series, Act 2 series, I'd put a little bit higher. The interesting note, last night after I had a glass, I let the glass sit for a few minutes and came back as it was drying and nosed it. And I get vanillas in it when I'm nosing it and when I'm tasting it, even in the 2017. And you get those dark fruits, the raisins, the dates, that type of thing. When I was finished with the glass, I went back and nosed it, and I was telling my wife, I said, this is one of the strangest notes, but it smells like a Little Debbie raisin cake. If you ever had those. Little Debbie raisin cake.
That's a throwback.
Yeah, I remember when I was a kid, but it's been dipped in some dark wine. And that's what I get when I nose the glass when it's all done. You get that raisin, that vanilla cream, a little bit of that. You mentioned earlier that shortbread, that cake note, but you also still get that port in there. So that's something to look for if you get a glass of this, or when you finish a glass, is to go back and smell it and see if you get any of that. I think
you know what I was kind of getting on this, and I hadn't put my finger on it. It's almost like a carrot cake, like that spiced coffee cake, carrot cake kind of baked good. I will also say that for anyone out there listening, if you like your whiskey on the rocks, I just used a little water dropper and put a few drops of distilled water in the last of that one. I would avoid it. I would avoid this whiskey because it really does kill that sweetness, and you basically get the barrel tannins in spades when you add water to it. So if you're the type of person that has to have a little bit of water or has to drink this, cold, I'd pick something else than the 5.5.
Definitely for the 49.3% ABV, you don't get that. I've never, over the years when I've had glasses of the Midwinter Night Dram, I've never added ice or water to it because I think that you don't detect high alcohol content. It's a great balanced whiskey overall.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I added a few drops to each one. I only had a little bit left in the glass, and it kind of brings out a barrel bitterness to both of them. And that's one of the things I really like about this is that there isn't a ton of bitterness in either one of them. It's just really sweet for a rye whiskey, but spicy at the same time. And adding the drops of water brought out a bitterness I don't particularly care for. So I would suggest maybe finding something else if that's your jam.
Right, and especially most estimate that there is some 15 to 16-year-old, or it used to be. I don't know if the Act 5 has that rye whiskey in there. And I think a lot of times the rye whiskey can actually take a little bit longer in the barrel than some others. But I don't know what the mix is between the 6-year-old MGP and the Barton, the older Barton, if they're still using that. But you don't get a lot of oak, a lot of tannins, a lot of astringency, or those things. So I think that's a plus. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I still like it a whole lot. I typically don't drink my whiskey mixed at all anyway. So I always try to splash whatever I'm reviewing. I try to splash it at the end because I know a lot of people do. They kind of prefer the ice or the little bit of water on it, especially those barrel proof things. And sometimes it actually winds up helping. You don't need to do much in a pour. If you're doing a pour that's only an ounce and a half or something like that, you need about a third of an eyedropper full of water to splash it. Maybe even just 3 or 4 drops of water. Just make sure it's distilled if you want to do that. Sometimes it can bring out a lot of aromas that can be, if it's a really high proof whiskey, it can bring out a lot of aromas if you're kind of new to the tasting of the whiskey thing that you can't get to through the high ethanol type of fumes from a barrel proof type of whiskey. But this one, it's not that high. It might seem like it to some people, but it's not that high. It certainly doesn't drink like a 98 proof or above. So avoid the water, avoid the ice with this one. Drink it neat. Definitely sip it sitting next to your Christmas tree with the fire going, maybe watching Christmas Vacation or one of those, whatever your holiday movie is.
I would agree.
But that's tasty. Makes me wish I smoked a pipe and could sit around in a smoking jacket with a Christmas tree in the back. And
nice cherry tobacco pipe would be good with this.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I love the nose on these. It's a really unique. It's a really unique flavor. There are other ryes that are barrel finished. There are plenty of ryes that are barrel finished, as a matter of fact. And I don't know what it is on this that you get that cinnamon clove note going on it, but this definitely does. And it's still, especially the nose. I promise you, if you get one of these and you pour it into a glass, let it sit for about 10 minutes before you really approach it. It's going to smell like Christmas to you. I don't know how else to explain it, but it's going to smell like someone's making a gingerbread house, or you've just opened up all of those ornaments that have pine smell and cranberry and stuff floating around the house. It's just really nice. And this time of year, I mean, what could be better than sitting back with a Midwinter Night Dram?
I agree. It's nice to sit and let the glass fill the room. It's a definite winter Christmas time aroma.
Well, very good. You got anything else to add? You got anything coming up on the site? I know your whiskey advent calendar is coming out here. Going to start that soon.
Got that in the back here. I'm actually going to look at doing the first write-ups on that. Start doing a draft of that probably tomorrow. Hopefully have the first one published on the 1st while I'm camping in Denver, waiting for the next Stranahan's finished release for Snowflake. And hopefully we'll be able to get a write-up out there for all the Modern Thirst fans for 24 straight days, taking us right up to Christmas time frame of a lot of different rare and interesting whiskeys. It starts off with a 25-year-old Dalvini. I'm looking forward. I know there's an Elijah Craig barrel proof in there. That's one of my favorite bourbons.
Oh yeah.
I hope they put what batch it is so I can compare it to some other ones I've had. But looking forward to doing that.
If they at least list the proof, we should be able to figure it out.
Right.
And for those watching or listening, if you go to ModernThirst.com and then under whiskey and bourbon and whiskey, click on bourbon and whiskey resources, there's actually a chart of all the releases of Elijah Craig barrel proof, so you know which batch it is you're getting based on the proof. We got a lot of resources on the site for anybody who hasn't used it. We've got tasting wheels and a list of the BTAC releases. All sorts of things. I've even got a list of historical Kentucky distillery designations, so the KSP dash, whatever, of probably 100 to 150 old. A lot of them are defunct and only existed for a couple of years before Prohibition, but I've culled that from a number of different sources as well. So we've had a lot of people email us about that. But check us out on ModernThirst.com. You can find me you can email me at bill@ModernThirst. You can find me on Twitter at Bill Straub. And we are at modern_thirst at Twitter. And Wes, where can they find you?
You can find me, email Wes@ModernThirst.com. You can find me on Twitter at Wes ModernThirst. And a little plug here on the World Whiskeys front. The next whiskey that I'm looking at reviewing is a Compass Box release, if you can see that, Phenomenology. Ooh. Which is
I saw that the other day. I think I saw that box in a store.
It is an amazing presentation. I think there are, I want to make sure here, it says on the back, there are 7,000 bottles of it released. Jeremy and I just tasted it the other night, did our tasting notes for that. It's going to be the next one I write. I hopefully will get it out next week. And it's something definitely worth visiting. The whole idea behind it is Compass Box does not release anything about what is in the bottle. They want everyone to experience the nose, the taste, and describe it. And in late December, they're actually going to tell what's in the bottle. With the cost of it, I would imagine it has some old scotches in there, and I'm actually going to try to guess maybe what a couple of them are. When we do the review on Modern Thirst. So hopefully this will be out next week. If you have an interest in Scotch and blended Compass Box releases, you'll want to read about Phenomenology.
Fantastic. All right. Well, thanks, Wes. Anyone who's watching or listening, thanks a lot. You can find us at ModernThirst.com. And thanks for watching. Cheers.